East in this episode. We will release the Big Ten West in a couple of days. But let's get to Colorado, reported by Brett McMurphy, one of the preeminent insiders in the sport of college football. There were some breadcrumbs that maybe have led us here, right? George Klykoff and the Pac-12 not announcing a TV deal at last week's Pac-12 Media Days in Las Vegas. Some rumblings that some teams, and we had heard about maybe a week or so ago, if there's going to be any team to leave Colorado, most likely. And sure enough, it's reported that there's a board meeting happening tomorrow on Thursday, and then Brett McMurphy kind of breaks the news that they will be leaving the Pac-12. I have some thoughts about this as well. As some of you know, I'm an Arizona State alum. I'm based right next to Tempe, Arizona. But I'll let you go first. Your kind of immediate reaction to the news.
Not entirely shocked because, like you had mentioned, there had been some rumblings about this. I think it was in the Pac-12 meetings back in May. Rick George, the athletic director at Colorado, was asked directly about this, and he said, our long-term ambition is to remain a member of the Pac-12, but, and you always know when you have a but, that the before part is pretty much meaningless, we still have to look out for the best interest of Colorado athletics. And if there was going to be a team that was going to jump ship, remember, Colorado did the same exact thing to the Big 12 just about 12 years ago because they thought the Pac-12 would give them more long-term stability. And now the roles have reversed. They're going back to the Big 12 for that stability. And they didn't have a long-term, I mean, they've only been in the Pac-12 for 12 years, unlike teams like Cal, Stanford, both the Arizona schools that have been entrenched in this conference for decades. They didn't really have those long-standing relationships. So to me, it's not entirely surprising, especially with the way the Pac-12 has just continued to push back this media deal, which we've been talking about for over a year. And it just seems like there's nothing in advance. So I can't really blame to join the Pac-12. And from what it looks like, this will be their last season in the Pac-12 before heading to the Big 12. But what are your thoughts generally on this?
Brett McMurphy said they will go there in 2024. I don't think the Big 12 schedule has been released for 2024. My first thought is the Pac-12 is dead. RIP the Pac-12. I would expect a couple more teams to follow. I think it makes all the sense in the world for the Big 12 to add 3 more teams, most likely coming from the Pac-12. I know there were reports that right now the Big 12's done and they're content with Colorado. We're going to see the Big 10 have 16 teams next year. We'll have the SEC have 16 teams. I think it makes sense for the Big 12. My guess would be Washington, Oregon, and Utah would be on the top of their list. It would literally give the Big 12 a coast-to-coast footprint in the sport, all the way from Florida with UCF to Seattle, Washington, and Eugene, Oregon. Really big brand with the Oregon Ducks and 2 really good kind of media markets, Salt Lake and then Seattle. So, listen, my first thought was the Pac-12's done. You got 7 other teams that are going to be in flex now, right? What happens with the Arizona schools? What happens with the Bay Area schools? What happens with Oregon State and with Washington State? I could see the Big 12 and the Pac-12 and what's left of it merging with the Mountain West and maybe rebranding itself as being kind of the more Pacific time zone league. I think certainly that could be on the horizon. But yeah, it's finally I think the nail is in the coffin, right? The Pac-12 has had major issues really since Larry Scott couldn't get a deal with DirecTV for the Pac-12 network, right? And it was just issue after issue after issue, having the headquarters in one of the most expensive parts of the country, not partnering with a Fox or an ESPN for your network and doing a standalone network, all the carriage disputes, not being able to get your TV deal. I was telling you before the pod, like I was reading things about San Diego State, how they had left the Mountain West because they thought they were going to the Pac-12, and that didn't work out, most likely because they know the Pac-12 does not have a good future. So as an Arizona State alum and as an Arizona State fan, my thought is what happens next with the Sun Devils. But I think it's pretty clear that the schools that really care about athletics are trying to separate themselves from the leagues and the schools that don't care about athletics. And I'm just not sure if a lot of the schools I mentioned in the Pac-12, what's left of it, care that much about athletics.
I think that's a really, really intriguing point, especially with a school like ASU that I feel like has a lot of advantages to be very, very serious in athletics. You have a large alumni base. I mean, it's the biggest. Is it still the biggest enrollment in the country for a
It's
four-year
one of them,
university?
yeah. Certainly, you have the Phoenix market, and I get that.
Yeah,
But realistically, as far as sports goes, what does ASU have to give the Pac-12? The football team hasn't had a relevant season since 2013 when Todd Graham took them to the Pac-12 championship game and they lost to Stanford. The basketball team, I don't believe, has made it past the first round of the NCAA tournament since James Harden was here, I think in 2006, right? The baseball team hasn't made it to Omaha since 2010. The women's basketball team hasn't had near the success it had in the mid 2000s with Charlie Turner Thorne. She's now gone. So, like, from a sports wise, and ASU just doesn't resonate a ton in the Phoenix area, especially when all of their athletic programs are just very middle of the road. I think with Michael Crow, he just has not shown a willingness to put resources into athletics, and that's the number one indicator of success now. What schools care about their athletic programs? I don't think Arizona State's one of them.
interesting. Well,
So,
because I feel like they're still intriguing for the Big 12 just because, Brett Yormark has said he wants to have a team in all time zones. So we'll see if they go up to him. And it seemed like for a long time it was Colorado, Utah, and
yeah.
the two Arizona schools, the four corner schools. I guess we will see what the future holds for there. And for the Pac-12, do you just try to stick with 9? Do you make emergency invites to San Diego State, Boise State, SMU, or those teams you are linked with? I just don't know where this ends well for the Pac-12.
Yeah, we'll see. I thought the realignment stuff was over. I thought we were kind of all focused on the 2023 season and all the storylines there. And literally as media days are happening across the country, the Big Ten started their media days today.